All right, thanks for joining us today on the Windy Ridge Outdoors podcast. Today we're going to be going over the fur market forecast for this upcoming season and for all the auctions that will be going on in 2024 across the nation. The sources we're going to be referencing, of course, are going to be the fur harvesters reports from March of 2023 and May of 2023, and we're going to speculate based off of those fur prices what they're going to be this year. We're also going to go over other ways that trappers could be making money, ways that you're leaving money on the table. We're also going to be going over the ways that the war in Ukraine and the Chinese economy is affecting fur prices. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to get started off. Like I said, all of the sources we're going to be referencing are from the 2023 March and May fur harvesters results. As everybody knows, beavers were a hot commodity this year, mainly due to the felt market. So beavers this past year, like I was saying, the reason that the prices spiked so much was for the felt market, which means if you're a beaver trapper, that was a good thing. Most people nowadays coyote trap and they bobcat trap, not so many people beaver trap. The reason that the felt market was so high, demand for cowboy hats due to such hit television shows as Yellowstone. I would even call it the resurrection of the cowboy era. Beavers in March averaged about $30 to $31 a piece, which is a very, very high average. In years past, we've seen prices between 13 and 16, so jumping all the way up to 30 on an average, that's really, really good. And transitioning over to May, the market seemed fairly stable. Most people know that the market in March is usually a little bit better than the market in May, but the market in May, we saw eastern beavers bringing an average of about $29 to $30, and western beavers bringing an average of $27 to $28. That's still a very good average. I would call the beaver market highly volatile, which we'll talk about the market volatility here in a little bit. By the way, I'm just throwing this in there. If you're a fur buyer, do not use this video for a reference of what you should pay for. We buy fur. These are not necessarily the prices that we're paying. Pay whatever you want to, buy at your own risk. And if you're a trapper, these are not necessarily the guaranteed prices. This is only speculation. We're just making sure we throw that in there so that come this March or May or whenever you ship your hides out or whatever auction house you go to, there is no guarantee that these are the prices that you're going to get. This is just this is our opinion. We're looking at the facts of what fur has sold for, and I'm going to give my opinion on what it's going to sell for. So we're talking about beaver, we might as well move on to castor. Castor actually has taken a fairly significant drop in price over the past few years. There just hasn't been the demand for it, and there has been a few more beaver caught in the last few years than what there typically is. In May, it sold for about $69.90 a pound, and that was for grade A. That was for grade A, number 1 grade castor. They didn't have the prices list for the number 2 and number 3 grades, but we can all assume that that was significantly lower. The average in March was $55, which is about what castor's been going for about the past 2 or 3 years. The mink market is all just the same as what it has been. It's still low. In March, the average at fur harvesters was about $3.55, and in May, they only sold 32% of what they had, and it was $8.84. That second number in May sounds kind of high, but I'm emphasizing they only sold 32% of what they had, so we can all assume that that was the very best stock that they had that they sold. So mink prices are going to continue to stay low. You've got to remember that there's mink farms. There are so many more mink that are being brought in now that the prices are going to stay about that. The otter market in March, the first section sold for an average of $29.93, which is kind of what it's been for the past couple of years. It's not anything crazy. And then you look over in May and they sold for $28.83. The fisher market is still relatively strong, not quite the high prices that we'd like to see. In March, the first section sold for an average of $40.31, and then in May they sold for $39.34. So That's about what it's been. We'd like to see prices a little bit higher than that, but that's just the way that it is. One thing that surprised a lot of people, myself included, just because in the couple years previous, muskrat prices have been so high, muskrats went mainly unsold. So they have a decent stock of them up there. I would say the muskrat prices are going to continue to stay low, which honestly shocked me. So I don't look for those to bring a lot of money. I would say that more than likely in the markets, depending on where you're located, they're going to bring between $150 and $350. Red foxes still very low. It's discouraging to a lot of land trappers. We're primarily water, but it's discouraging to us too. The market's just not really there for them right now. Eastern, we're going to go through March 1st. The eastern section sold for $13.66. Northern was about 17, western was 7, and central was 5. You look over into May, and eastern was 10, northern was 19, western was 10, and central was about 450. Those prices are very, very low, and you have to remember those are averages. The prices are very, very low. I don't see the red fox prices really gaining much traction this year. There's not much of a market for them. We'll move down to gray fox. They sold for about $12.40 in March, and in May they sold for about $10.50. I do personally feel like gray fox may potentially take a little bit of a jump, only because there's not as many of them being caught anymore. They're more of a rarity, and it's just the way that the market works. Even though there's not a ton of demand for them, the supply is going to drop, so the prices are going to have to come up a little bit. It may not be this season, but within the next few seasons, I do expect to see that. The coyote market, and this is one that everybody loves because we were all used to those really high prices, and now coyotes are pretty much worthless. In March, western coyotes sold for an average of $37, and eastern coyotes sold for an average of $14. I need everyone to understand they only sold 60% of the stock that they had. So those were more than likely the best dogs that they had, and then some decent dogs. They were not the average run-of-the-mill crappy, mangy, or even slipping dogs. They more than likely didn't sell the ones that were missing a little bit of hair, didn't have good guard hair. Those were some of the better dogs that they sold, and those really aren't good prices. And if you're taking fur to a fur buyer, to an auction, here in the East, I'm going to be honest, you're not going to catch 10 dogs and take them to anyone and average $14 a piece. It's just not going to happen because there's not a market for them. They're worthless.
Last year, how many coyotes did you buy?
I went to the auction in Glenville last year, and we bought 155 coyotes. And by the way, they were
and it was like 5 cents a piece.
We paid a nickel a piece for them, and yes, they were low 3s and 4s, but a nickel a piece, a nickel. And I just about guarantee that's what we're going to buy them for again this year. It wasn't like I wanted to pay that for them, but no one was going to bid for them. They were going to go for a penny, so I just decided to pick them up for a nickel. And I brought them home, and I sifted through all of them, and we ended up, I think I threw 100 of them away, and I held 30 of them, and then I shipped 20 of them out, and then guess what? We didn't sell any of them because they're worthless, because you can't do anything with them. You look over into May, and prices did drop, which is kind of expected. Western dogs brought about $24, Eastern brought about $11, and then the lower Eastern U.S. brought about $4. That's pathetic. I mean, that's low. And I honestly do not see that changing very much. You look at coon, and in March, Canadian brought an average of about $7 to $8. Western heavy, which those are good coons, brought about $9 a piece, and then Eastern coon brought about $2 a piece. Those prices I see staying about the same. I don't see those coming up hardly any. I don't see those going down any. You look over into May, Canadians brought $7.53, Western heavies brought $3, and Eastern brought $2.50, and that was only selling 46%, so that was some of the better stuff that they sold. Those prices are low. I don't see those changing very much. The demand for those comes a lot from the Chinese and the Russian market. We're going to go more into how the war in Russia and then the economy in China is affecting that. but I do not see coon prices getting any better anytime soon. Skunk prices are actually doing fairly decent. There's always a novelty market for skunks. So if you can catch a prime skunk, especially a spotted skunk or a wide striped skunk, I do see you making some decent money there really for what they are. In March, they averaged $16.50 a piece. And then in May, they averaged $12.66. So that's really not that bad in my opinion. There's not a ton of them caught. So if you're looking for, think about it. You're going to get more out of a skunk than you're probably going to get out of a coon, a dog, or maybe even a fox. So if you're willing to put up any of those, I would take the time to put up a skunk. Possums. Oh, possums.
They haven't been good for a long time.
Well, but the thing about a possum is a possum's always worth a dime or a nickel or a quarter. I mean, you're never going to be shocked about a possum. In March, they sold 18%, which is awful. So they pretty much didn't sell any of them, and they sold them for $1.87 a piece. So you've got to remember, they only sold 18%. That means they sold the absolute best, the cream of the crop, the best ones they had, and they averaged $1.87. So do not go to your fur buyer and expect $2 a piece out of your possums. It's not going to happen.
You couldn't have expected that for a long time.
No. And then you look over in May and they were mainly unsold. They really didn't sell any of them. If you're a northern trapper, you might like these prices. We're down here in West Virginia, so I don't study these prices as hard as I do the other ones. But to us guys down here in the lower 50 states, these are decent looking prices. You look at Wolverine, they brought $440 to $450 a piece on average in March, which I personally feel like that's good money. You guys, you can let us know down in the comments whether that's true or not, but I feel like that's decent money. I don't know how hard they are to catch. I've never even began to try to catch one in my life. There are none even remotely around West Virginia, but $450 for a hide, I feel like it's pretty good money.
Yeah, one animal, that's pretty good price.
Yeah, so I mean, and I know there's not a ton of them caught. I don't have it wrote down exactly how many of them that there were caught, but $450, that sounds like decent money. You look over into May, and they brought about $407 a piece. That's still $400 for a hide. That still seems like pretty decent money to me. The market's always going to taper off a little bit from March to May. You look over into timber wolves, which, once again, these prices, I don't know.
They sound good to us,
but
we've never tried to catch them before, so you really don't know.
But you look in March, and Arctic timber wolf brought about $257 on average. Eastern timber wolf brought about $118 on average, and then black timber wolf brought about $440 to $450 on average. You transition over to the May sale, and it seems like prices actually stayed pretty stable. Actually, the eastern timber wolves rised a little bit. The Arctic went for $250, Eastern went for $150, Western went for $206, and then the black jumped all the way up to $507. So there is a little bit of an uptrend on timber wolf, especially since they sold for more in May. I do see them potentially staying at about that 500 to 250 mark. It depends on whether it's a black one, of course. The black ones are always going to bring more just because there's less of them. But if you've got a black dog, I could see it being I don't see it dropping below 450, especially since the price rose to 500 in May. But maybe you could get $500 a piece. But that does seem like pretty decent money.
Something else I was going to ask, are they still having the price on just like killing them?
Well, I don't remember what states that it is. I know that it was either Iowa or Iowa or Indiana. They were putting a bounty, and it wasn't timber wolf, it was just regular wolf, but they were putting a bounty out on wolf, and it was something stupid. It was like $1,000 a head, plus you got to keep the carcass.
Let me check that real quick, just so we're getting our facts straight here.
Well, while he's looking at that, we'll continue down on the bobcat. Canadian bobcat in March brought an average 136, Northern brought 104, Western brought a 302, and Central brought 125. So those are relatively decent prices for cats. They're not the $150 and $200 that we saw 10 years ago, but that's a decent uptrend. And you look over into May, and Canadian went for 126, Northern went for 95, Western went for 203, and then Central went for 107. So we'll talk more about bobcat here in a little bit, but honestly, those are fairly decent prices.
back to the wolves again. Of course, if you guys are out in the Midwest or western part of the country, you'll know more about them than us, but we still like to talk about it. Idaho was the one who had the bounty on wolves, and it was up to $2,000 per wolf. So that's a lot of money.
Yeah, and I mean, you got to keep the hide.
Yeah.
So you're going to make the $2,000 a head, plus you're going to keep the hide. I'm sure there's regulations on that. You would need to check into that yourself.
Yeah.
But I do occasionally get emails about it. Moving on to lynx, which no one around here is going to catch any of those. Those are up. You've got to be in one of the high northern states or Canada. But they brought an average of 121, and then in May they brought an average of 114, which honestly I thought lynx were worth more than that.
Yeah.
Once again, that's not an animal that we catch very much, but still $100 for a hide. I mean, there's not a whole lot you can do about that. I'm going to do my market breakdown now, and then I'm going to make my predictions on what they're going to go for at this upcoming market. The beaver market boom, like I said, it was heavily driven by the hit TV show Yellowstone. I would even call this the new cowboy era. And the beautiful thing about it is, where they're not going for the actual guard hair, they're going for the felt that's underneath of all the prime hair. The animal doesn't have to be primed, so it can be harvested at any time of the year. I am by no means suggesting that you don't want to try to get prime beaver. I think you always should, because if that hatter market crashes, you're going to need prime beavers to make decent money. I would say that the market is definitely volatile, just because that is the hatter market. I don't know if they overstocked last year. I don't even know if they're going to need to keep up their stock this year. That might just be a one-time thing. So I'm going to call it volatile, but I would be willing to bet that the average is going to continue to be between $22 and $30 per animal, as long as that market doesn't tank. Worst case scenario, if the market tanks, it's just going to go back down to $15 to $18 average, like what it always is. I do believe that castor is going to take a dive, because now that people know the beavers are bringing relatively decent money compared to what they used to, where the market's almost doubled on average, that means more people are going to be trapping beaver. Beaver obviously are the ones that produce castoreum, so that means that since more of them are being harvested, there's going to be a much larger supply of castor than what there normally is, assuming that people sell it or ship it out. So I can see that price diving down all the way down to maybe $35 to $40 on a pound. And of course, it depends on the grade. But I do definitely see that taking a dive. Mink is going to stay low. I don't see any way that it's going to rise back up, especially since where COVID killed all those minks over the past couple of years. They haven't completely sold out of the high stocks that they've had of mink. Mink's going to stay between a $2 and $4 average. It's just the way that it's going to be. There's not a lot of value in minks. Otters, I believe otters are going to take a dive. I don't think they're going to be worth as much as what they normally are. Who catches otters? Beaver trappers. There's going to be more people trapping beaver this year. That means that the supply is going to be up unless something happens that is unforeseen. There's going to be more of them taken, and the prices are probably going to take a little tiny bit of a dive. Yeah, I think the market's going to drop. I think that otters are going to go down maybe to an average of between $20 and $25, taking a $5 or $10 dip. I don't see that market staying the same. I do think more of them is going to be harvested, and I just don't think that the demand for them is there. Beaver trappers do occasionally catch fisher. The market may drop just a little bit, but the thing about it is there's not a ton of fisher taken, just because they're not readily available like the otters and the beavers are. So fishers might take a little bit of a drop. They're a safer bet. I can see them staying at between $35 and $40 a hide. I would be willing to say that that's a pretty safe bet. Muskrats, like I was talking about earlier, expect those prices to stay low. There's still high stocks of them. There's not really in demand. I don't really know why. It's fairly well known that the muskrat population is dropping. I don't really know where those hides were going. But I'd give it another year or two. They might be worth more if you want to try to hold on to them. But I see muskrats staying at about a $1 to $3 average. And $3 honestly is probably kind of high for rats. I don't see a whole lot of people to be able to make more than that until fur harvesters can unload the stock that they've got piled up. red and gray fox, we're going to lump these together. There's no demand. There's just no demand. I do see gray fox potentially rising a little bit, just because, like I was saying earlier, there's not really any gray fox around anymore. Not necessarily. I can't speak for the entire U.S., but in the Mid-Ohio Valley or anywhere in West Virginia, there just aren't any. I mean, I remember whenever I was a kid, you'd go to the fur auction and there'd be hundreds of them. And
how many was there last time we went there?
This past season, there was like 5.
There, and some, like half of them weren't even good.
And you've got to remember, I don't know how it is about every state, but the West Virginia fur auction, a large percentage of the fur that's taken in West Virginia is at that sale. There are not that many fur buyers left in West Virginia. As far as I know, there's only 3 or 4 of us left, and I'm one of them.
Well, and now most people buying fur is your
well, I mean, there's taxidermists that buy it, and there are little mom and pop shops that buy it, but they're not buying it in mass like we are. They'll pick up a couple of hides,
and they're just going for the cream of the crop, the very best.
Yeah, they're not willing to pick up whatever you bring like we are. So I don't know why the gray fox market's low. I do believe that the grays at least will come up a little bit, like I said, just because there's not as many of them. But the red fox market's going to stay low. There's just not any demand for them. I see reds and grays. Reds for sure staying at between an $8 and $12 average. Grays more than likely are going to stay at an $8 to $12 average, but maybe we can see those grays get up to 20. I'm doubting it. I'm definitely not going to pay for them like they are, because it's not a fact. I don't really think it's going to happen, but I do think it's a possibility. So now we're going to go into the coyotes, which a lot of you I know is going to want to hear about. There's no demand. Ever since Canada Goose went away from using the coyotes for their trim, which I'm sure a lot of you know by now, they were the big buyer. They were the reason that the prices were staying high. And now that they're out of the picture, there's just no demand. There are still companies that buy it, but they were the big dogs. They were the ones who were keeping the prices high. And now that they're out of the picture, now that they're using synthetic fur, it's just not going to happen. Until a new fur company, a new fur farrier, someone who makes clothing, or a new trend emerges, the coyote market's going to struggle. They're just not worth a lot of money. Now, keep in mind, if you get a really pretty dog, you get an albino, or if you get a black, or something that's really off collar, you need to make sure you know what you got. I'm going to be honest, I probably wouldn't take that to a fur dealer. I mean, unless you know that they have that corner of the market pinched where they're going after those specialty hides. More than likely, I would get that tanned myself. I'd send it off to somewhere like Moyles, and then I either keep it for one because it's just a beautiful animal, or you could sell it yourself on somewhere like eBay or Facebook. I mean, you're going to get more money out of it that way. Yeah, you've got to invest the money into it to get it tanned, but
you get a bigger payoff.
Yeah, those animals. If you've got a good black dog,
it's totally worth it.
Yeah, it's worth it, especially if it's not manged up, if it's not rubbed up, if it's got good guard hair on it. That animal's going to be worth getting it tanned. If you're looking for the way to make the most money, then that's what I would do. If you're not wanting to put the time into it, then yeah, take it to the auction, take it to a fur dealer. They're still probably going to pay you decent money for it, especially if it's a good-looking animal. But if you're not going to take a black coyote to a fur dealer and get $100, it's not going to happen, because if that fur dealer wants to take the time to make that $100, he's got to buy it. He's got to pay for the shipping to ship it off to Moyles. He's got to pay Moyles to tan it, which is going to be roughly probably between $25 and $35. If you didn't skin the animal, you've got to skin it, flesh it, stretch it, which I'm assuming the more likely if you killed an animal like that you would try to take the time to do that. I know not everybody has the ability to completely put up fur, whether you don't have a fur shed or a garage, or whether you don't have the knowledge of how to flesh or stretch an animal, which, by the way, we're going to be uploading how-to videos just so everybody knows how to do that here soon in the future. But most definitely, and that doesn't even just go for coyotes. Anytime that you get a specialty animal like that, you can take it to a fur dealer, see what they're going to pay you for. But if you don't like the price, just tell them that you don't like the price, and then take it back and get it tanned. And that's actually one of our mottos. We don't have to buy. You don't have to sell. We're all trappers. We're all friends. Have a great day. If you come to our fur shed and you don't like our price, you're not going to hurt my feeling by not selling to us. I want you to feel good about the transaction, just like we need to feel good about the transaction. So if you're ever in the Mid-Ohio Valley, you want to sell fur, you can bring it out to us. If you live too far away, ain't no big deal. There are fur buyers everywhere. You just got to take the time to look for them. we'll get back into the market. Our predictions for this upcoming year. The war in Ukraine is hurting the market badly. A lot of coons go to Russia and Ukraine, and China brings in a lot of those too. And the Chinese economies have been in decline for a while. Like I said, Aaron's going to take a dive into that here in a second. There's also a very large stockpile of coon hides in Canada still at fur harvesters right now, and like we've been talking about supply and demand, there's a large supply and there's no demand, so they're not going to be worth anything. Your eastern coons are probably going to continue to average between $1.25 and $2 a piece. There's just not any demand for them. I mean, if you get a really, really nice coon, you might get $3 to $5 out of it, but it's probably not going to happen. You're probably going to get between $1 and $2 a piece. And then those Western heavies and those Canadians, you're going to probably expect between $2 and $5 for your Westerns, and between $3 and $6 average for your Canadians. And those are for the better coons. Those aren't for your average run-of-the-mill coons. The skunk market has actually been doing very well. Just because of the novelty market, not a lot of people like to fool with skunks. There's always going to be a market for them because of the people who make crafts out of them, and then just little knickknacks. I would expect the skunk market to stay pretty stable. Here in the East, I could expect skunks probably to average between $5 and $10 a piece, maybe a little bit more, especially if it's a really big, nice, pretty wide stripe, or even better, a spotted skunk. And I don't see those going above 12 anywhere in the United States, maybe 15. If you've got a good spot, I mean, people are willing to pay good money for spots. There's not a lot of them anymore. I know I've actually personally been looking for one for a while, but there's just not any of them left in West Virginia. The possum market, it's a possum. It's a possum. They're always worth a nickel. If you get a really, really nice big prime one, you might get a buck out of it. Maybe. You might. Maybe $1.10. But put it up. I mean, you caught it. Ain't no reason to throw it over the hill. Mm-hmm. And if you've got kids, that's even better. Give it to them. Let them try to put it up. Guess what? It's a possum. If they ruin it, that's fine. And possums are great to train on anyway because they're really thin-skinned. If you want your kid to get good at stretching, or even if you're new at trapping and you want to get good at it, put that possum up. Possums are not the easiest animal in the world to put up, especially if you got to flesh them. If you skin them, they're easy to nick. If you flesh them, like I said, they've got that real thin hide. Just take the time. You don't got to flesh them a lot. They're not like a coon or a beaver, which is great, but they're just good practice.
Easy to catch. It's just good training, and you don't got to worry about losing a whole bunch of money if you screw it up. It's 5 cents down the drain.
Yeah, they're great training. That's what they're good for. And you know what? We're trapping. If you're going to take that animal's life, then you need to do the best that you can to give that animal better meaning. You're giving that animal's life purpose. I'm going to lump the wolverine and the timber wolf market together just because
we kind of already went over.
I think that the market's going to stay strong. There's not a ton of them caught. The prices have always been relatively decent as far as I know. And with those low catches, the money's going to stay there. I am expecting the prices to stay the same. I can see Wolverine next year bringing an average of between 400 and 450, just like it did this year. And then Eastern Timberwolves bringing 125, and Arctic and West Timberwolves, I can see those bringing between 200 and 250. There's always going to be a market for them. Now, the Bobcat market is on a whole nother level. It's been a very, very volatile market for the past couple of years. Prices within the past few years, they've went for $20 on average, and then this past year, they went for $80 on average, especially at our local sale. Of course, we were talking about fur harvesters. They went from between $100 and $250 on average. These, and I'm making this clear because I'm a fur buyer. If you're a fur buyer and you're listening, do not base your prices off what I'm getting ready to tell you. I am not paying these prices because this is just a prediction. This is what they may bring. I don't necessarily know they're going to bring this. I don't even necessarily think they're going to bring this. This is just with the data we've compiled. This is the prices I think cats can bring this upcoming year. Canadian cats, I think we'll see $100 to $120 average. Northern 85 to 100 possibly. Heavy Western cats maybe 200 to 250. Central 90 to 110. And then those Eastern cats I think we'll see between 60 and 90. That's as long as they stay on the trend that they're on right now. Now, they could take a dive just like they have in the past. I remember whenever I was a kid, my dad was still running the company. There was one year that they were buying them and they were worth $150 a pop, and then guess what? Next year they were worth like 30, because that's the way the cat market is.
They're just up and down, up and down.
It just depends on what the market's looking like. So do not go to your fur buyer and think you've got a $200 cat. They're going to pay what they feel like they can make out of it, because if you're a fur buyer or if you're taking your stuff to a fur buyer, you got to remember, and by the way, fur buyers don't make good money. I just want to make that clear. The only reason that we buy fur is because we want to come and see what you caught, and because we're stupid and we like to do it. Anyone who buys fur is touched unless you work for a major corporation.
Yeah, like somewhere in China or Russia.
Yeah, like there is no money in buying fur. Yeah, a great example. One year my dad probably made $10,000, $20,000 buying fur, and then guess what? Next year he lost all of it plus some.
Yeah.
You don't make money buying fur. You are literally just playing the stock market,
except worse.
Except worse.
Yeah.
Like you're not making any real return on your money. If I buy something off someone and I make $1, I'm usually relatively happy with that. We do it because we love it. It's what I was raised to do. It's a part of who I am. So we're going to continue to do that. So just remember, don't get mad at your fur buyer. Now, if they're a crook, you're going to be able to tell if your fur buyer's a crook.
Yeah.
If you know anything about trapping, you're going to know pretty quick. Especially if you follow stuff like this, you're going to have a decent idea what prices should be. So if you take your cat to a fur buyer and they're like, I'm going to give you a nickel for it.
They're crazy.
Then you get what I'm trying to say. The lynx market, the demand is always relatively strong just because there's not nearly as many of them taken. I would expect prices to stay the same. I'm gonna guess that the lynx averages are probably going to continue to be hovering right around $100 to $110 on average. Do not leave yet. We're going to go to a commercial break here real quick, and whenever we come back, Aaron is going to go over the Ukraine war, how it's affecting the fur market, the Russia economy, and the Chinese economy. And then after that, we're going to talk about how you could be leaving money on the table, ways you could be making more money with the animals you're catching. We'll be right back. If you want professional results, you need a professional lure. Go with Windy Ridge Trapper. We've been making lures since 2005 that we use ourselves daily on the trap line. Whether it's Coon Juice, Beaver Buster, or Mad Dog, there's not a single one of them you can go wrong with. If you're interested, you can find them at our location where we buy fur in Rockport, West Virginia, or you can buy them online at murrayslures.com. Thanks.
All right, guys, welcome back from commercial break. We're going to get into talking about how the Russian economy, with the war going on, has tanked prices, and China's economy has tanked, and that's tanked prices.
I know that during the commercial break you were talking about something regarding the child labor in China. What was up with that?
No, not child labor. That was youth unemployment rates. Youth unemployment rates are extremely high right now for China, and it's at roughly 20%, but that's what they're reporting. They've actually stopped reporting it because it's so high. And the reason it's so high, it's going to sound silly to a lot of people, but it's because everybody in China is not extremely educated, very highly educated. The vast majority is highly educated, and employers have a lot of people to pick through to see who they want, because you've got to be really smart to get a job right now in China, just because everybody has a college degree there and just speaks different languages and stuff like that. It's just is a lot of competition to get a job in China right now, and their real estate market's down because their people are buying stuff before it's even built because it's so hard to get a house. They're paying huge rates on real estate and stuff like that. So the entire economy is down, and as most people who know about fur, China is the biggest buyer of fur. So you keep that in mind. And he was talking about mink prices. They're low, and that's because China has a whole bunch of mink farms, and there's I think roughly 40 million mink are farmed every year.
I mean, that sounds about right, especially for a country like China, because I know that before COVID, which, by the way,
And I got some stuff to say about COVID too, how that's affected their economy as well.
yeah, and I don't know how many people know about this, but minks are actually susceptible to COVID. There were millions and millions of mink that either died or had to be put down because they were carrying COVID during the pandemic, which is another reason that like we were talking about earlier, that the market is absolutely plumb flooded with them. They're just now kind of getting them whittled down, but millions and millions of mink got wiped out all across America and all the mink farms that we had.
And continuing with COVID, I know everybody's tired of hearing about COVID, just like me, but China has had extremely high sanctions on their country about traveling in and out and importing in and out, and it's just hard to do stuff when they got that high sanctions. You just can't do nothing. And speaking of sanctions, that also gets us into Russia. Russia is being sanctioned by basically every country on the earth. They have basically nobody besides China and a couple other small countries that don't matter. It's just they can't get nothing, they can't buy nothing, they can't buy nothing from America, which is the biggest exporter of fur, I believe, besides China. But yeah, their economy's down because they're fighting with Ukraine. They've been fighting for going on 3 years now?
I don't know how long it's been.
Yeah, going on 3 years. Everybody, they're just sending troops in left and right. So where would they be focused on the fur market? They don't care right now. They're just trying to win a war. And Ukraine also buys fur, and they're trying to fight off Russia. So that's just a lot of stuff going into why the fur market is just down.
And the thing about it is, not all fur goes to those countries, but like he said, a large majority of it does,
Yeah.
especially coons.
And mink.
Yeah, both of them do. Not all fur products are produced in those two countries, because if they were all produced in those two countries,
Then you wouldn't be able to sell nothing.
yeah, you wouldn't be able to sell nothing. But where those two buy so much,
It's just tanking it.
absolutely destroying the market. But like we were saying, there is one thing I want to go over, to where if you are a trapper or you are a coon hunter or even a deer hunter, and you stumble upon a bobcat or a coyote and you blast it while you're deer hunting, there are other ways to make money. Some of you know about this. This is a fairly newly emerging market. It's been around for a while, but it's not been well known. So carcasses, skulls, even penis bones, all of it is worth money. Obviously, it's all worth different amounts of money. It depends on where in the United States that you are. We buy them. We actually very, very badly need bobcat, muskrat, and beaver carcasses right now. We use them in the bait that we produce and sell, the lure that we sell. We have some dealers that we sell the bones to, that they make art and crafts out of. Now, the bones aren't really hardly worth anything. They're worth a couple of pennies maybe for the rest of the carcass, maybe $1. And then we also have dealers that buy the skulls. So really, if you want to make some extra money,
There's a lot of ways to get some of your money out of it.
yeah, and I mean, everyone's complaining about the fur market being down, and we're trappers too, so it sucks. But if you want to make some extra money, just don't shoot the animal in the head. I mean, and by the way, that also increases the value of the carcass for people who are buying them just for the skull, which we're not just buying it for the skull. But there are people that are. If you shoot that animal in the head, it's going to substantially drop the value. For example, one of the guys that I sell my skulls to, I think he's paying, and by the way, this is not 100% factual. This is just off the top of my memory. I don't have this wrote down. But I'm pretty sure that he's paying like $3-4 for a coyote or bobcat skull. Well, if you shoot that thing in the head, he's going to give you like a quarter or 50 cents, because they just can't do with it what they want to do with it. But I actually have a list here. I'm not going to go through all the prices. I just want to give people an idea of what we buy. I will go over just a couple of the prices, especially things that we need badly. But we buy bobcat carcasses. We're paying $10 a piece for those carcasses. We buy coyote carcasses. We're paying $4. We buy beaver and muskrat and skunk for $5 a piece. Mink, we're paying $1 a piece for. Reds, we're paying $5. Gray, we're paying $3. Otter, we're paying $3. We actually even buy white-tailed doe skulls. We're buying those for $1.50 a piece. whitetail buck, it depends on the size of the rack, what it is. I would have to give you an estimate on that. It could be worth the same as a doe if it's just a little teeny tiny button buck. But if it's a better deer, it could be worth 10, 15, 20, up to $40 or $50 if it's massive, maybe even more. Coon skulls are paying 25 cents a piece for. Possums the same, we're paying 25 cents. Coyote and coon penis bones, we're paying 10 cents a piece for. So that's all stuff that you're throwing over the hill, and you might be thinking, well, I don't really want to fool with it. Well, if you're willing to skin a coyote and maybe sell the hide, which by the way is where all the work is in, for a couple dollars, and maybe even if it's a really good one, $10 or $15, why not sell the carcass? Why not take the time to sell the skull? Even if you don't live remotely near us, which by the way, depending on how many you have, we are willing to drive to meet you, because like I said, some of the things are in high demand with us right now. But if you're willing to do all the work for the hide, why not take the extra 10 minutes to just gut the carcass and set it aside? If you do, and by the way, everyone who buys them has a different procedure. All that we ask is if you are planning on selling to us, and we'll buy it. I don't care if you shot the animal in the head. I don't care what you did, because we buy it for the meat too. We need everything. But all we ask is that it's gutted and that it's not rotten in any way, shape, or form. It's very important because, like I said, we use the glands in the meat for the bait that we make. I'm not saying that as soon as you dispatch it, you need to gut it. You're not field dressing a deer. We're not eating the meat. But it needs to be relatively fresh, especially if it's a fox or a cat, just because they get green belly so fast. So it's important that you take it home. More than likely, you're going to skin it that day anyway, so skin it, just gut it real quick, and then throw the whole carcass in the freezer. You're going to get top dollar out of the animal if the skull is intact, because that does come into the factor. The meat freshness comes in as a factor. But save them. There's no reason not to save them. If you're interested in any of the fur prices that we have, because of course, like I said, we're fur buyers, you can go check our website. We post our prices on there every year. I think we actually have ours up right now. But you can follow us at Windy Ridge Trapper on Facebook, and we're on the process of getting our website reopened up.
And something before we leave that I want to keep you guys minding. If you're trapping right now, let's be honest here, you're doing it because you like to do it. It's just like fishing and hunting. You just got to keep that in mind. Prices will eventually go back up. It fluctuates.
Yeah, and honestly, I'm so tired of listening to people talk about how bad the prices are. The price has been bad for years. They've not been good since I was a little kid. And I do have a little bit of bias on what I'm getting ready to say, because I am a fur buyer. I don't mean to offend anybody whenever I say this, but stop taking it out on your fur buyer. Stop taking it on your fur buyer. We make less money whenever the market's bad. I want to make that clear.
Yeah, most people who are actually selling the fur to the fur buyer are probably ending up making more money than the guys who are selling the fur.
Well, there's no probably about it, because the deal about it is, whenever you take your fur to a fur buyer, before you walk out of that building, you know how much money you're going to make. You have the ability to say yes or no. We don't have that ability. We are buying your fur only on instinct, hoping that we're guessing the market right, and we could buy all the fur that we want this year or any year in the future, and we could ship it off, and yeah, we might make a little bit of money, but guess what? We could lose all of it too. Like I said, I shipped 30 to 50 coyotes up last year, and they didn't sell one of them. Not one of them. And whenever you ship your fur to fur harvesters, if it's a long-haired animal, you have to pay to ship it there, and you have to pay a $1.50 to $2 drumming fee. So I had to pay to send those hides up there.
And you didn't sell them.
And then I didn't sell them. And I might not ever sell them, because they weren't great dogs. Oh, that wasn't all that we sent. We sent beavers, of course, and coons and muskrat and fox. We sent a bunch of stuff up there.
But you even still didn't sell all of those.
No, we didn't. And there's fur that's sitting up there in Canada that I've sent up there 3 years ago. It's an investment that you just have to hope pays off. So I hope that this market recap was good for you. I hope that you enjoyed it. If you have any opinions, or if you think that the market's going to be a little bit different, leave us a comment.
And if you want to see us talk about something else that you're curious about, maybe something with other things to do with trapping or fishing or hunting, just let us know, and we will try and cover it.
Yeah, it's no big deal. We're going to try to do this every week. We're going to try to do trapping on Tuesdays. We're going to call it Trapping Tuesdays. And in the future, we're hoping hoping to maybe even do 2 or 3 videos a week. Hopefully, of course, we'll do the trapping once every week, because that's our brand. That's the main thing that we do. But we're hoping to get into hunting and fishing as well. So yeah, I appreciate that you guys stopping by. If you would like, it would help out the channel. Give us a like, leave a comment, maybe share us with your friends, and we'll see you in the next time. Thanks.